Fineberg. Welcome to his Whole House series, Being Present for the Tough Talks. Over the next several videos, we will walk together through what can be, for most of us, topics that are challenging to discuss. Here with me today is Molly McNamara. Her professional and personal experience as past president of Texas Trauma Coordinators, co-author of the awarded Texas Youth Suicide Prevention Federal Grant. Molly's also a licensed minister, a prayer counselor, and mother of 3. She is also the founder of his Whole House ministry that serves the greater Houston Metroplex and also just the larger Christian community and helping bring healing to the hurt. And so I just want to thank you for being here today, Molly, and certainly your past experience as a mother and your experience with this tough topic of suicide that we're going to talk about today is going to provide us with some deeper insight to the Father's heart. And so thank you for that. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
And so I want to start out just by asking, what led you to be willing to share today? What place of vulnerability have you been brought to that you feel okay with sharing?
Yeah.
This tough
Well,
space?
being present with a tough topic and having that tough talk with someone is challenging, especially when we consider the topic of suicide or suicide attempts. It has been my experience, because life can get pretty messy,
Yes.
that suicide can come at you from a variety of areas and not know, what to do with it. For me, that was what happened about 21 years ago.
Mm.
My son completed suicide by hanging himself, my son Adam. And that absolutely devastated me, not only as a parent to lose a child, but also the additional trauma of the type of death that happens. For me, it was a place where I absolutely was bombarded with what had happened, that Adam had died, plus every other traumatic place in my heart that I hadn't really dealt with in a healthy way. It really came forward for me. It all piled up. So I actually spent about 11 years stuck, and really, for all general purposes, you would see that I looked like a real successful person in the world's view, and took a lot of risks, and was really high profile. But it was all about me hiding. I was hiding in my pain and hiding in busyness in order to try to keep the pain at bay. And it doesn't really help much, but really I was just in a great deal of pain until I started my journey in 1998 and really began to see myself come forward out of that pain and find healing for myself. And now, today, I get to walk with a bunch of others as they find their journey and healing and wholeness. Yeah.
You brought up a good point, Molly. I do see a lot of people in their pain go into performance-driven, the mentality, and they just try to stuff. And so thank you for being open to share how it was coming out sideways in different ways in your life that you had to really look in the mirror and face some of your brokenness.
Absolutely.
Through this.
Well put.
And what was crazy to me as I was preparing to talk with you today are just the statistics around suicide.
Yeah.
And so could you share with us a little bit about that and the numbers?
Yeah, the numbers actually are getting higher. It's now a 3rd largest cause of death among teenagers is suicide, 7th among adults. And we're talking about 47,000 Americans that complete suicide each year, and that's the 2017 statistics. And it puts the attempts around 1.3 million, and that's just the ones we know about. So it has been a growing issue, and it's time to talk about those tough talks.
This is a tough question, but a suicide or an attempt of suicide is so painful, and it seems like we may be sensationalizing the event by just discussing the topic. I know that we don't want to sensationalize it because that can lead to more deaths. And so how can suicide or an attempted suicide be discussed in a way that will be helpful and not harmful, especially when we're talking about teens, you know, because they so often follow their peers and care about what their peers are doing. And will you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. That actually can be a topic that's really can happen to us. And so oftentimes what I've seen is myself and others don't really quite know how to talk to another person because we don't want to make it, you know, a sensational thing or have erroneous information. And so really staying honest about what has happened and talking about where the person was in their story, if you happen to know where they were, whether that meant that they were grappling with illness or whether they were grappling with pain themselves, then we can talk about honestly what had happened and not the detail.
Right.
Not the detail. It really needs to be respectfully a topic of consideration for the family, for the victim, and any place where there's erroneous information, just bringing back to reality what the conversation needs to be and what the current truth is that's known. I can tell you, for me, I had an occasion where somebody came to my door after my son completed suicide, and they were in the Christian community, and they were bringing a pie. In their particular denomination, they believe about suicide and those that complete suicide, that they do not go to heaven. And she reiterated that as she gave me a pie, and how that she was sorry that my son had gone to hell. And that was really difficult to hear as I received the pie, and thanked her very much. And but what I've learned is that people will come with their concepts and their belief systems, and for the survivor, which I definitely have been,
right,
it's a matter of putting your hand up and saying, you know, I can't really hear about this right now. And really stopping that conversation from going on. And that's a respectful way to say, not something I'm going to have as a part of my my conversation with you.
And so that is just a way that God has shown you to just guard your heart.
In a healthy way.
In a healthy way.
Yeah.
How do we talk about what happened and how that person is feeling?
Well, again, I think we are right back to the name of our topic is being present. Being able to be present with the people, to see the value of walking with that individual as a survivor of the suicide. We now know, based on research, that about a 300% increase occurs to every single person that's in relationship to the person that completed or attempted suicide. So based on that understanding, learning how to know that the value of relationship is right, exactly what we need to bring. The value of who we are as individuals, how that we can demonstrate with our vulnerability the ability to sit with someone that's broken and not try to fix them, and look into the places where we can walk together and experience and know for them a place of safety, as being one that can listen and can pray and can stay with them while they're broken.
I do think it's a deep place of just being comfortable with your own silence.
You're right.
So you can hear the heart of the other person.
Yeah. Very well put.
It takes discipline.
Actually, it takes doing your own work. The more that I've understood my healing journey, the more I'm able to stay with other people in some pretty horrendous pain. And so what that says to me is the more whole my heart is, the more able I am able to let that pain go through me and back to the Lord and let Him hold it.
Yes. Beautifully put. We hear of suicide completions or attempts quite commonly now in our communities. How can the Christian community become better prepared for what is needed after a suicide occurred?
That's a great question. And, you know, the aftermath of a suicide is a horrendous time of pain. Everybody that is left, or the survivor of a suicide, or even someone that attempts, the issue of an attempt can leave everybody feeling very lost and vulnerable.
Yes.
And not quite able to find your place. And I know that firsthand. And so again, looking for that way in which to come alongside of a person and to be there and sensitive to them in the midst of their grief. It's about the resolve of grief. It's about walking through that valley of grief. And it's about a place where there can be a sense of some of the normality of just routine. You know, so just taking walks and let's sit down and eat something and just let's go ahead and go to bed, and just adding back some routine in the middle of that very, very difficult time. That is actually key to being able to walk with another person.
And I'm going to go through some tough questions that we commonly hear.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you ready?
Sure.
One we hear so often is, why did this happen?
Wow, that is a tough question. And, you know, there is no answer to that question whatsoever. The why is something that I don't believe that we as humans outside of that person's experience can really understand fully, because we don't know what journey that person had to make that decision. And for me, with the why of my son's suicide, I didn't know what to do and how to grapple with that. And I kept laying it down, but it kept springing up in my heart until I really recognized that he had actually pierced his left ear. And so he had an earring, and I already had pierced ears. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to pierce my left ear and put a second hole in. And I actually usually have a second earring now in my left ear. And that's actually where my why hangs, outside of who I am and outside of my body. So that, you know, there was a time for a number of years that I pulled on my earring just to remind myself where my why needed to be, was outside of me, so that I can resolve and walk in a place of moving forward. So that was just a very unique way, a creative way that I really connected to Adam.
Yeah, it's a sweet way to remember his life. Another question that people often ask is, how did they do it? And that's hard. I mean, I can imagine that it would be hard to answer as a mother. I know it's hard to answer as a niece of somebody that had committed suicide. And so, what do you say to that question?
The method of a suicide, people do ask that. And I will frankly answer that. And we should, you know, by gun, by suicide, by hanging, by a car crash. But the details really need to be kept private.
Yes.
Because again, we're not interested in building a story to sensationalize. Yes. And so just respectfully answering with an honest answer, but not going into detail. Yeah.
And this one, I know that you probably cried out yourself, and I know you did, was, why, God? Why did you let this happen?
Yeah, wow, yeah. Because we often, you know, how can, God's big enough, He could have handled this and taken care of this. And, you know, we hear that He can raise somebody from the dead, so How come he didn't? And it just really kind of puts, for my heart, it was a place where I questioned about God's goodness. It was like, what kind of God? What I've come to understand and really be able to rest in is that God's intention, that I understand as a loving Father, is to continue to give his children choices. And our choices at times, and mine for sure, and sometimes we're not the very best with ourselves, right? Or with him, or with the choices he gives us. And I personally did have recognized that, given the situation and the pain and circumstance, I think that anyone could move to a death by suicide just based on not knowing how to be able to find an outlet. Yeah. It's all about being able to become a person that's willing to be an outlet for another to process. Yeah.
So many times people think that it's not okay to be angry at God. But we want people to know different. And so what would you say about it's okay to be angry with God?
I agree with you. Absolutely. You can be angry with God, he can handle it. And I think it's a tough topic in itself. But I also know I was angry at Adam. I was really mad at him. And it was like, what? How could you do this? How could you leave your family, And so just, again, looking at it as a part and process of that feelings are absolutely valid. And being present, again, being present with anger can be challenging for someone. So again, looking at, wow, this really is a place where you're angry. Well, you darn right I'm angry. And being okay with that is really, really an important key for being present.
Because of not wanting to deal with their own pain of how it hurt them, they want to place it somewhere. So for you, it was wanting to place it on Adam, and then, you grappled with God and the different places that you placed your pain until you placed them in the right place. So will you talk about that?
Yeah. Knowing where to put your pain is kind of what I'm hearing you say. And yes, we all grapple with that issue, and knowing where to put your pain takes some courage. It really takes a lot of courage. And it takes people that are willing and safe to walk with and really believe in you that you can walk through this and not rush you. I know that what I've noticed with folks and with myself at first, when you begin to walk with another person and you're walking through pain and you're not comfortable with your own pain, then you really don't want to hear about theirs.
Right.
And so it's a matter of recognizing how comfortable I am or not with pain and why. Right. Because it keeps me from being able to embrace and be with you if you're angry, because a feeling is a valid place to be, and God has created our feelings as messengers, and really the fact is the message is you're grappling right there, and can somebody stay with me in that? And it can be really hard, and I can tell you there was many days that I picked up lots of rocks and threw them, just like the woman in Forrest Gump movie that threw the rocks at her house that she grew up in, and because she had been molested in that house. And the fact is there was a lot of days I picked up a lot of rocks and threw them because I didn't know where to find. But now I understand that God does want to hold that pain, and there is a way to do that. And there's a place of rest in the place of sorrow.
When a person when they're going through the grief, and there's lots of people that are wanting to help out or talk to them about what they just went through, how do they identify a safe place?
Yeah.
Because what I keep hearing through everything you're saying, Molly, is find that safe person. And so what are some characteristics or just things that like feelings that you felt that you knew certain people were a safe place to share your pain?
Yeah, good point. People that were willing to help me recognize where I was. A friend of mine that said, "It sounds like you've lost hope." I hadn't even thought of that. And I had to grapple with that for a good while. Somebody that's willing to say, I think this is trauma. Is that possible? Just, again, to begin to put words up on where I am and not try to push it away or cover it over with a scripture or a nice thing to say, oh, you'll get through it, you press on. That doesn't do anything to sit with me in the pain. And so safe people are willing to talk about hard topics. And that's what hopefully that we can share today is ways in which that others can learn too to become that safe place.
Another question that I want to ask you is, how can I cope with a suicide?
How can you cope with a suicide? Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a big question.
It is.
Yeah. You know that every single person has a different response to a suicide, but everybody does have a response. And to not turn away from it, not turn away from your heart, to not turn away from the place of pain, not turn away from the place of promise of something, and find a place to share and process. For sure.
Emily, we hear about suicide completions or attempts quite commonly now in our communities. And we've talked a little bit about the Christian community and how they can come around us. But for me personally, when I went through prayer ministry, through his whole house, I really saw the Christian community in action as I shared a very deep hurt of my own. My uncle committed suicide and we never really talked about it. But when I went to get married, I had a lot of things come up in my own life and they were coming out sideways. And I went to the church to talk to somebody and they hurt me. They asked if I had heard of bipolar, and it scared me because my uncle had been diagnosed as bipolar. And they didn't know that, but it further wounded me instead of sitting with me like we're talking today in the tough topics and the pain. Yeah. And I left there thinking, is that my destiny? And when I went through his whole house and we just sat with each other in our pain, you asked for forgiveness on behalf of the church. And as I forgave the church for how they had hurt me in that moment, and I came against just the thoughts of suicide that I had thought about, or the thoughts of being bipolar, I felt a release. God healed that very broken place just because somebody was willing to sit with me. And so, will you just reiterate how the Christian community can come around and what it's supposed to look like?
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful demonstration of how God can bring healing out of woundedness when even we as the church don't recognize how to walk with somebody and be present in a tough talk.
Right. What can you tell people about warning signs?
Very, very important thing is the people that will talk about death, obsess over it, give away possessions, okay. Write note after note that relates to death, considering someone that just totally changes in personality, totally from what they were, and totally changes. So those are all signals and valid ways to say, hey, I wanted to know, are you considering suicide? Saying those words to someone, as I've learned to say, can actually be relieving. It's like, you know what? I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
And of course the next question is, do you have a plan? And there's a lot of folks that do think about completing suicide, and having a place where you can say that out loud and begin to process a way back to hope and take some steps to be able to find ways in which to find your normal patterns of life again is really helpful. And it can be overwhelming for anyone when they've been traumatized repeatedly, what we call rapid fire trauma.
So if we come into knowing this about someone, that they are contemplating this or have attempted this, what do we do?
So get a hold of a safe person. For me, I had a friend that said, you need some counseling. And, okay, all right, I'll get some counseling. Really didn't know why I would need some counseling. Right. It wasn't even until later that I recognized that statistic where, greater than 300%, a lot more likely for all the survivors to consider suicide. I had no idea that I would consider that as an option, but I did later. And when I did, at least I began to understand my need for healing. So never undervalue the opportunity to get some counseling, get that safe place, and of course, be that safe friend so that if you have to take a hospital break and say, okay, let's go take a little visit to the hospital just to check you out, make sure that you're okay enough with yourself, because if there's a plan, then that's actually an emergency, not just a process.
Right. I'm going to ask you about Adam.
Well, sure.
And would you be willing to share with us some of the things that were going on in his life personally that you were made aware of, and then maybe some of the last words that y'all shared?
Yes, thank you. I'd be willing to do that. So my son died in 1997, and there was a lot going on. He was living in Nashville, Tennessee. He was not living with me. And he had a friend who had completed suicide just 3 weeks prior. He had just lost his girlfriend. He was actually just coming out of a legal battle where he had been arrested for stealing. And actually he was also considering coming to Houston to live with me again. So totally to leave Nashville. So a lot of changes, a lot of transition, and a lot of feelings of desperation. And so there was a paper that we found in his room, and his words actually tell quite an interesting story of pain, and it'd be my honor to read it to you and your audience. As the train sounds its whistle in the cold, cold dark, where does it go? Nobody knows where does it end. I don't know. As I walk down the street, all I can see is the cold, dark street. What does that mean? For I can't explain the pain that's been eating away within me. How can I stay away? For pain hurts me day after day. Will anybody listen to what I've got to say? For the pain eats my life away and nobody can feel. It's just more pain. For nobody knows how I am. I just want somebody to understand. But why is my life the way it is? Heartache and pain, that's all it is. Will somebody love me and understand? I can't understand when people say they do love, but do they really? Or am I just another fool as I sit here and cry my heartache out in pain? For I had something I lost and will never regain.
Power of one. Tell me about that.
The power is you or me, being that individual, being that glimmer of hope, being that one that's willing to take the hand of another person and say, come on, let's find a little warmth and little light. And just being able to be that representative, that one that models the possibility of something different other than the pain. That place where we don't turn away from the woundedness and we don't try to cover it over with nice words.
Right.
And be willing to say, I have no idea why it happened, but I'll sit here with you. I'll be here. in this. Let's just stay here. That kind of place where you offer a hug, shoulder to cry on, a place to walk with the people right where they are. That's the power of one individual. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you just for sharing your heart today. And I think this has brought up a few things that may spark other tough topics. And we talked briefly about God is good.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a series of events that God showed you after Adam's death about how good he is.
Yeah.
And so look forward to hearing about that.
Thank you.
About God's goodness and a future tough talk.
That's another tough one.
Yes. So, well,
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. And it was my pleasure to just sit with you today. And I'd like to close us out in prayer. Because without God, we are nothing. And our prayers are powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Lord, thank you that you are the Most High and awesome King who came to the earth so that we can have a place in you to bring our pain, sorrow, and our heartache. Thank you that you have overcome death and nothing misses your sight. That you have overcome the enemy's strategy to bring death, and we can be overcomers through Christ, the Lord of heaven and earth. You care about all your children and their pain. You are calling out to welcome all who would come and bring their hearts to you. Come hold us in our pain and nurture us back to life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.